That would be ridiculous. More like an activity. And there he sat. Yeah. So like there he sat. Like if you were, let's say your wife was trying to work and sat in the hospital for 5 hours, you didn't actually sit for 5 hours. You were at the hospital for 5 hours. But obviously, it's not effective. It's like a phenomenon. It's like I saw him, right? One. It's still a phenomenon. Yeah, so we can have what the behavior I'm going to be talking yeah, so the reason why that's right. No, it's not really good. This is natural. It's like Sayer. In this case, you can represent Sayer as it's not a model actually. Oh, okay. I think I fixed that. Specify the subtype. So that's why I did oh, yeah.
We don't need to specify.
So I don't have to label
In the first row, right?
It would be strong.
Right, we can abbreviate our answers like CONG.
Yes. Oh.
This is called Harrier River.
Miss Joe Parker. Right, that's my.
Okay, anybody recognize that music? Anybody understand his words? It didn't matter. That was 1970, and later on during the break maybe I'll play a 2015 version of the same music where they're trying to recreate that energy. This was 1970, where it wasn't about pretty faces, it wasn't about changing wardrobe, it wasn't about fancy dance steps, it was about pure energy. And you could see the energy in there. And Joe Cocker, the main singer, is famous for nobody understanding what he's saying. It's just, it didn't really matter. In fact, there are videos online where people took his videos and put their own words to it, you know, just trying to make sense of what he's saying. But it didn't matter because it was all about energy. And the other guy with the hat and the long hair, that was Leon Russell, who was an amazing, amazing linguist. Not linguist, musician. And he's still, actually in the recreation of this energy in 2015, he still played piano. But now all his hair, it's got the same hair, it's all white though. The reason why I did that, you never really need an excuse to play good music, but the reason why I did that is because the name of the song is Cry Me a River. Now why is that a weird name? Why is that a weird sentence or something? Cry me a river. What is cry? What kind of behavior? What kind of processes? I blew it already. Okay, it's a behavior process. So normally it doesn't take a goal, right? Or it doesn't take it can take a beneficiary. And in this case, when you say cry me a river, the me would be a beneficiary. But normally, if you take a beneficiary, if you say like, you know, she cried over me, or she cried for me, or she, you know, sneezed for me, I don't know, whatever she did for you. you know, usually would have the for thing, but it wouldn't normally be the kind where you can make it a direct kind of argument like cry me a river. We don't normally say like, you know, sneeze me, I don't know, whatever. You know, so in this case, you know, the point I want to make is that we often have these constructions. You know, if you read about linguistics, they'll often talk about rules. Linguistics, I mean, language is not really about rules. Linguists come up with rules to try to explain why people do what they do, but that's not the way people work. People don't work by rules. They work by just memory and by analogy. And so that you create, we have these conventionalized constructions, ways of doing things, and all of the patterns that I've been talking to you about, like with the material process, and there's certain arguments that go with material process and mental process, and there's certain arguments that go with mental process. Those are all constructions. But you can play with those. Like I mentioned with the mental ones, when you say the house was longing for their return. So even though the house is not really a sensor, by putting it in that construction, the house in that construction, it gives you this sense of the thing being animate. I think I'm not loud enough. So the same with this thing, cry me a river, is not the normal way we would say it, but he's trying to use the kind of more material type construction as like bake me a cake. But here, cry me a river, this is actually an old song, it goes back to 1954, this song, but it was made most famous by Joe Cocker, and then later a number of other people, including, I think, I don't know if the Justin Timberlake song is the same one, but there's a song by Justin Timberlake also with the same title. But anyway, so they use that kind of more material type construction to express this meaning, to make it more agentive, more like you're really doing something to somebody, you know, or for somebody. So it's an interesting, you know, a lot of the comments I've been getting, people saying, oh, you know, what about this and what about that? And language isn't a fixed system, and it's not rules. It's just memory, and we pull together bits and pieces, and we make analogies. So, you know, we want it to be like this, so then we copy that. And so the way that language works, it's very fluid. It's changing all the time. You have all been brought up in a very prescriptive concept of language where, oh, there's a right way and there's a wrong way. Forget about that. Unless you're writing academic papers, then there's a right way and a wrong way, because that's what we have to do. But in real life, there's no right and wrong way. It's just, how are you going to express your meaning? And, you know, if you want to get your meaning across, you do things in a particular way. There's no right and wrong. And the whole idea of right and wrong only comes from writing. Before we had writing, nobody cared about right and wrong. There wasn't right and wrong. People just talked, and it was always, you know, the way things were. And it's just as soon as people started writing things down, originally they didn't write down with the kind of writing that we do now. They just wrote down as a kind of aid to memorization, because they were memorizing everything. And so writing was just a way to help you memorize things, both in the West and in China. And then later on, it came to be this thing where it's removed from the context, and then people started having to read things out of context, and that was a very new thing. And then it also gave this sense of history. The word history actually comes from the Greek historia, which is, after the Greeks started, the Greeks were the first ones to really have a literate society. They had been writing in the Middle East for centuries, but it was this very difficult writing system, and it wasn't complete. It didn't have vowels. So that's why, like, when you read the Old Testament in the original Hebrew, it's very difficult to understand because there's no vowels in it. You have to make it up. And so there's lots of controversy as to what actually was said in the Old Testament. But then you know, so in the Middle East, they had these kind of vowelless systems, and then that was borrowed by the Greeks, but the Greeks added vowels. They changed some things around and made vowels, and then they spread the writing system. So then once they had writing system, they started having kind of a historical sense of things, and then so they started doing what they called historia, which was analyzing the truth and falseness of some of the things that were written down, and that came to be a separation between mythology and history, and that's where the word history comes from doing this kind of analysis of things. But anyway, why am I talking about that? Because writing gives us a weird perception of language. Writing is not language. Language, writing is just a way of representing language. And one of the comments or questions was asking about punctuation. You know, is punctuation a separate functional thing? Punctuation is what we developed. Originally, writing systems didn't have punctuation, both in China and also in Greece. You just wrote everything together, and you could write it this way, or this way, or this way, or this way. And people just had to figure it out because they already knew the content, and it was just, like I said, to help you memorize most of the time. So later on, when you had this kind of removal from the context and you didn't necessarily know the text, then people started having to worry about punctuation. And what punctuation is just a replacement for intonation. So, you know, a comma is a pause, a period, or, you know, a full stop is a bigger pause. You know, it shows the end of a thing. And then you have other types of punctuation that it's a way of replacing your prosody, what we call prosody or intonation. Because when you're looking at just dead letters on a page, you don't know how to break it up. And so the punctuation helps you break it up. And now we have another thing called emoji or emoticons, which is, now I've seen the word moji, which is kind of weird because emoji is from Japanese, means picture writing. Emoji just means writing. So now they call emoji, which doesn't make sense because it's just writing then. But anyway, that's beside point. So now we have emoji, and what emoji are replacement for the face. Because again, once you move it from the original context, well, normally when we interact with people, we see their face and what they're doing with their face, and they, you know, if they're winking at us or laughing when they say something. But when writing, you can't see that. So then we have the emoji to kind of put that back in. So punctuation, emoji, all these things have the same kind of function of replacing something that's lost when you get out of the face-to-face contact situation. So this is, So I started talking about that because of some of the comments that people were making about questions. So to summarize a little bit, I'm going to talk for a little while, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll have the test. Also questions if you have it. So we talked about the different constituents within the clause and within the clause complexes and things. And we talked about how the levels of structure. And so far, we've only talked about the clause level and the group level. But we will talk later about higher levels. And we talked largely about these three dimensions or functions or types of meaning in the clause. The experiential function, I think I lost the bottom part. So the experiential function, which is basically what people think of when they say, oh, what did he say? What they mean is the content or the experiential meaning is what he said was, oh, John left the house. So who did what to whom, where, and why. Then you have, at the same time, whenever you're interacting with somebody, even if it is in writing, you're always interacting with somebody. You know, maybe you write a diary to yourself. You know, you think you're the only one who writes the diary, but you're still interacting with yourself to some extent. A little bit of a reflexive thing. So there's always somebody you're interacting with. And then the clause has ways, at least in English, we have ways of marking what kind of interaction is going on in the clause. So that's this interactional meaning. What the clause is doing as a verbal exchange between the speaker and the audience. And then these two, in order to express these two, we have to somehow squeeze it into a linear order. And we have to choose what goes before what. And so that's the textual meaning. And it also, at the same time, not only doing that, but it's also relating the clause or the information in the clause to the surrounding discourse and the context of situation in which the discourse is happening. So it has all of these functions of tying it down, making it real, making it part of it. Because language is a kind of abstract thing, but then when we go from real experiences, then we abstract the way we create language, but then when we talk, we want to bring it back to the concrete. And so that's this, bringing it back with back to the surrounding discourse in the context of situation. Where's my clicker? Now, the three functional components of meaning are realized in all languages. So a lot of people have asked in the comments, what about this language? What about that kind of language or whatever? All languages can express these three types of meaning or have to be forced into expressing. Even sign language is can be looked at from this perspective. But the details of each of the metafunctions, what is conventionalized in each language, is going to be very different. And so this theory doesn't force any kind of analysis on any language. It's just a matter of looking at the language and see what resources there are. So this theory is all about seeing what resources does the language have for creating meaning. That's really what this theory is about. What resources does the language give the speaker or writer to create meaning? And so that's what we want to look at in these things. So in any one language, they're going to be realized differently. And so these are, it can be seen as three sets of options. So as I said, they're resources, but what that means is within each of these resources, it's a set of choices. You know, as I talked about in the first lecture, this is a choice grammar or paradigmatic grammar. So each of these functional structures is a set of choices that you can make. And they will create different meanings depending on which of the particular choices you make. And the three of these together determine the structural shape of the clause. And so when we talk about the things, so like with theme-rime structure, it's the speaker's starting point, as I mentioned, and it's also the addressee's starting point in terms of understanding what the speaker is trying to say. And that's how it's going to influence the rest of the clause. And the most important one is the topical theme, because that's what the clause is about. It's the topic of the rest of the clause. At least in English, it comes at the beginning. And the rime is just everything after the theme. Now we have these other textual and interpersonal themes. Basically, it's just a theoretical decision on the part of Michael Halliday to decide that anything that comes before the topical theme is also considered part of the theme. And the textual, some people ask, why does the textual come before the interpersonal? Well, if you think about it, if the function of the textual theme is to link to the clause that came before it, then it makes sense that it comes at the beginning of this clause. Now that's only in English. It's not necessarily the case in all languages. As I gave you examples in Chinese, you know, words like if and whatnot very often come after the topic in Chinese. So they don't have to come there. It just makes kind of sense that if you have something that links to the clause before it, you put it at the beginning of the clause, that kind of makes it for an easy transition. And then the interpersonal is, again, because the theme is your starting point, very often you want to tell somebody right away, well, frankly, I don't agree with you. So you put the frankly at the beginning so you're kind of alerting the hearer to your stance right away. So that when they process the rest of it, the I don't agree, they know that you're speaking frankly. You know, you can also add it at the end. You could say, I don't agree, frankly. You can put that as an afterthought, or you can put it in other places. You know, I frankly don't agree. But the thing is very often you would put it at the beginning of the clause just as a way of kind of establishing your stance, and then you say what you want to say. Only the topical theme is necessary. The others are all optional. That's why I put parentheses around all of these, because they're optional. They can have them or not have them. And they differ depending on the mood of the clause. So we talked about how in the mood residue structure, the mood is marked by what occurs in the theme. And so it also, whether or not you have a topical theme, whether your topical theme is marked, or the unusual type of theme, or an unmarked theme. So in the unmarked case, the subject is going to be the theme in declaratives. The finite plus subject or WH word is going to be the theme in interrogatives. And the predicator is going to be the theme in imperatives. This is the unmarked case. There are lots of other possibilities available. You know, as I said, it's a resource for making meaning. It's not forcing you to do things in a particular way. Also, once you have a particular form conventionalized, you can do whatever you want with it. And so this is why we have what Michael Halliday talks about as grammatical metaphor, where you use, say, a declarative or an interrogative to actually give an order. So you can use a form that developed for one meaning to convey some other meaning. As long as the hearer can figure out what you're saying, anything goes, basically. So the theme, the unmarked theme, the topical theme is always the first participant, process, or circumstance mentioned in the clause. So that's a very simple, hard and fast rule. So whatever you find that's the first, circumstance or participant, meaning, like actor or sensor or whatever, or even a passive, it would be the goal. So any of those, or the process in an imperative, if the process is the first thing you come across, then that's going to be the theme. Now, WH words, a lot of people had questions about WH words. How do you know when the WH word is a subject or not? One easy way is just to look at, in a WH question, if the finite comes before the predicator, then you know it's that this is not the okay, this is not the best example. What did break the window? This is an emphatic one. See, as a note, it's always variants of everything. So what did he break? You have the finite before the subject, so this is the normal interrogative order, and so this is going to be a complement, not the subject. Normally, the way you would say this is who broke the window, or what broke the window. The only time, I don't know why I did this. This is grammatical. This is an okay sentence. The only thing is that it would have a narrow context in which somebody, we were talking about, Billy broke the window, and you say, no. Or you say the ball broke the window, and you say, no, the bird broke the window. And then you could say, well, what did break the window? So you'd have to pronounce this with a very heavy stress on this, because it's the contrast is on, something broke the window, and you want to say, okay, what did break the window? Whereas the unmarked situation would be what broke the window, where the predicator and the subject would be in the normal order. No, this is right. No, okay. This is still right. I got confused. This is still right, where the subject is before finite. This is finite before subject. So if you have, okay, now I know I was confused. The same reason you're confused is because if you just look at this line, what did, it seems like it's the same thing. It's not though, because the he here comes in here, where there's no other possible subject in this case, right? So in this one, what did break the window? You can ask yourself, what answer could I give you? You say, well, the rock broke the window. Whereas in this case, what did he break? He broke the window, right? So when you're trying to figure out what is the subject, try, kind of unquestioning it and give it an answer, and then see what the answer works out as. And then you can see where this ends up as a complement or as a subject. And again, the second thing is that here you've got a noun group after the finite, whereas in this one you won't have that, before the predicator. So this is one of the rules of English, is that the subject always comes before the predicator, except when it doesn't. All rules are not rules. That's the thing. So there are some cases where the subject comes after the predicator in existential clauses, or like there are many. Like when you say there are many, why do we use the plural? There are, because it's agreeing with many people, right? You don't say there is many people. There are many people, because in this case, the subject is the thing actually after. Anyway, we're not getting into that. And then in this case, we have the circumstantial adjunct. What time did he come? And again, the finite before the subject. So it should be easy to find out. And again, if you say, he came at 4 o'clock, then it's going to be very clear that the what here is referring to some kind of circumstantial element. And these boxes, when I draw a box like that, it means that it's not part of this process. So in the book and then in my handouts and stuff, so the did come is actually one process, and the actor ends up in between them only because of the reversal of the finite and the order of the finite and subject. Okay, now in the mood residue structure, the mood block has the function of marking the interactive event, and in particular the grammatical mood. So what I'm asking you on the test is to give me what the grammatical mood is. So the mood block, when it appears in the clause, includes the subject, which is the entity that, by reference to which the proposition can be affirmed or denied. In other words, it's the thing that the validity of the proposition depends on. And then the finite, which is the tense, the modality, and polarity, and possibly also modal adjuncts, which includes non-finite polarity. So sometimes there's the word not, for example, can be both in the finite and also in the residue. So for example, he can't not come today. If you say he can't not come today, the not come today is all residue. He can't is the finite, right? So means he's not allowed to come. He's not allowed to not come today. Yeah. So he can't come today. He can't not come today. Or you could say he can not come today. If you say, is he allowed to not come today, right? So today he doesn't have anything to do, so is he allowed to not come today? Then you could say, yes, he can not come today. So that not is not part of the finite. That's part of the residue. And you can see the difference in meaning, right? So if you say he can't come today, it means he's not allowed to come today. If you say he can not come today, then it means he's allowed to not come today, which is very different in meaning. And then the modality, the temporality, mood, common adjuncts, all part of this modal adjuncts. There questions? It's getting a little rowdy there. And then the residue has the predicator, which includes everything except the finite that's part of the verb group. It specifies the voice, the process, the aspect, or secondary tense. And possibly one or more complements are also included there. And the complements, again, it's a little bit difficult in English because complement is technically something that could be subject but isn't in an active. It could be the subject in a passive, but it's not the subject in an active clause. And the problem is that some things that aren't traditionally complements can also end up as subject and passives nowadays because English is kind of changing. And then we have these circumstantial adjuncts as well. So it seems people like these kind of pictures, so I drew one of these. I've never found those very useful, but anyway, some people suggested them. One person also found the flow chart, which has all of the possibilities. Because this is a system of choices, the systemic part, this is called systemic functional linguistics. I'm not teaching the systemic part. The systemic part actually draws diagrams of all the choices. Like Michael Halliday was telling me when they started this, they had just a whole wall colored with paper, and they'd start on this end, and then they'd go and they'd write all over the place so that the whole grammar of English was like displayed in this long flow chart. I don't do that. Some people like to think that way. I don't think in that way. But this is the reason why I don't use the third or fourth edition, because the third and fourth edition of the same textbook, the Introduction to Functional Grammar, does have all that systemic function stuff. So if you like those kind of pictures, get the third or fourth edition of this book, and then you'll get all of that stuff. I tried teaching that one year when I was still working in Australia, and the students hated it. So that's why I went back to using the second edition. They found it very confusing because you have all of these things going all over the place. And if you like to think in those kind of images, that's great. And you can find stuff online. I put links on the Blackboard, I think, to websites about systemic functional linguistics. There's all kinds of resources. And then the last part is the transitivity structure, which is the nature of the event or the happening represented by the process and its relation to the different participants and the circumstances of the event. So we talked about the 6 process types, the material, mental, and relational, forming a circle. And then with the behavioral between the material and mental, the verbal between mental and relational, and existential, what happened? And existential between relational and material. Based on the nature of the process and the nature of the participants directly involved in the process, so we give them different names. So the reason why we call the actor and goal for material processes, and we don't use that for other ones. Did we lose sound? Thank you. So with the, is this on? Yeah. So the reason why we give different names, in many theories they won't give that many, those kind of names for different types of processes. Sometimes they will. Some will give a lot more names. But actually that was one of the questions that someone asked is, how do you decide how many names to ask? I mean, how many names to designate for these different roles, you know, that the participants play. So some theories have lots of different roles, some theories have less roles. And it's really an empirical question. It's, in other words, a question of the language. You look at the grammar of the language and you see what roles are significant for understanding how the grammar works. Because everything comes from, you know, look, the texts themselves, the grammar itself. So you look at which roles are distinguished by the grammar, and then you give them different names if they are distinguished by the grammar. If they're not, then you don't need different names. But like actor and goal for material, we call them actor and goal because we have this idea that, you know, somebody's doing something and it's affecting the action, as we say, is transitive, so it's going across to the goal. Now, a lot of people are confused that they thought all material processes have a goal. No. You can have transitive and intransitive clauses. As I mentioned, transitive means it goes across to the goal, but intransitive, like you say, I'm walking, that's intransitive. There's no goal involved. It's still an actor. It's still somebody doing something. And in many cases, it's going to be difficult to distinguish between a behavior and an actor in an intransitive clause. But the difference in the behavioral type is that there's some kind of internal or mental aspect to it. Whereas with an actor, just doing something, you know, like I'm, you know, walking, or I'm, you can even say eating, you know, as an intransitive without a goal. And so having a goal is not necessary for it to be a material process. Then you have sensor and phenomenon, and in the mental, the reason why we change the names there is, again, because it's not somebody doing something. It's not somebody doing something to something else. So the sensor is really just experiencing something, and the phenomenon is just hanging out. They're not doing anything. It just happens to be the thing that's affecting the sensor, but the phenomenon doesn't have to actually be doing anything. And so we have to give those different names from actor and goal, which is, this is something that's affected, this is something that's doing something to affect that. So it's a very different conception. And then with carrier and attribute, you know, another question that came up was how to distinguish between attributive clauses and identifying clauses. In all cases, go back to the meaning. See, what is it doing? So when you say, like with the possessive ones, the piano is Peter's. So the question is, what are you doing when you say the piano is Peter's? Are you trying to give an attribute to the piano? You say, oh yeah, this is a lovely piano. I really like this piano. And then the other guy said, well, you know, I want to buy this piano. And the other guy says, well, that piano is Peter's. Now, I'm not identifying the piano in any way. All I'm doing is giving it an attribute that it belongs to Peter. I'm just telling you something about the piano that it belongs to Peter. But the same exact sentence, the piano is Peter's, if we have a bunch of different different instruments, we have a guitar, we have a piano, we have whatever, and I say, which one is Peter's? And I say, the piano is Peter's. Then I'm identifying which of those things is Peter's, right? So the meaning is quite different. This is, again, it's not the words. It's what you're doing with the words. That's what it's all about. The meaning, go back to the meaning. What are you doing with the words? Now, we've been doing a lot of stuff out of context, which is really bad. That's not the way linguistics should be done. But it's just because of the way we have to teach that it's very difficult if I could just give you large texts and work from that. So, but whenever you have a problem with this, always go back to the meaning. And now in the exam, I gave you actually one consistent text. I didn't give you isolated sentences. I gave you one text. So it'll be a little bit easier, I think, there. And then with the verbal type, you have the sayer and receiver, the target, the verbiage. So the sayer, the one, of course, saying, the receiver, the one listening. The target is the one you're talking about. It's kind of like a goal, but it's a goal in the case of verbal actions. And then a verbiage is what you're talking about as a direct participant. So the verbiage and the circumstance of matter are very similar, but it's just you have a choice. Again, it's all about choice. You have a choice of profiling it as a direct participant, which is verbiage, or as an indirect participant, which is a circumstance of matter. And then you have the behavioral, the existent for existential. And so the existent is just something that exists, and generally those are, again, there was a question before the class started about he's sitting there, right? Is that existential or is that behavioral? Well, again, it depends on how you use it. If you say, if he's sitting there as opposed to he's lying there or he's standing there, right? So you want to make it clear that he's sitting, he's actually sitting, right? So maybe he was really sick. For a long time he couldn't sit up, and you say, wow, now he's sitting there. So then that would be really behavioral. But if you say like, oh, my wife was giving birth and I sat in the hospital for 4 hours, you didn't really sit for 4 hours. You were in the hospital for 4 hours, and you may have been wandering around, oh my God, doing this kind of thing. But it doesn't matter. You can express that as sit for 4 hours, because in that case you're using it like an existential. And in many languages they don't actually make a distinction between those two. They just use the same word sit all the time to be in a place. And it's just up to the hearer to determine what they mean. And so the same in English, that we can use sit as an existential verb, or we can use it as a behavioral verb. And again, it just always goes back to what is the meaning? What are you expressing? This is why we don't say verb, we say process. What is the process you're expressing there? And of course, we want to tie this all together. So a single element in the clause is going to be multifunctional. They can, in other words, it'll participate in all three functional structures at the same time, or more than one. And so they'll have, so like in this one, John is the subject, it's the mood, part of the mood block, it's the topical theme, and it's an actor in the transitivity one. And then you have the table, which is a complement, is part of the reme, and it's a goal within the transitivity thing. Now we can change this around. I could say the table was bought by John, where we can make the table the subject, and John ends up actually in a circumstantial phrase. So we have, again, these different choices that we make, and how these different meaning choices interact is going to give you an overall meaning that's quite different, and that's why it's important to tease these apart. And this sort of three-way analysis allows us to see what functions a constituent has in the clause and how the three types of meaning are going to interact with each other and create the overall meaning of the expression. Okay, I think that's all I got. All right, now any questions about this before I'm going to answer some more questions. I don't have a lot of time, but a few more things. I've answered some of them in the process. Are there any quick questions about what I just said here? Oh, one of the big questions that came up often is this identifier and identified. That's very much a contextual thing, because identified is basically kind of known information. Identifier is the new information. So that's really problematic when we do sentences out of context. But within the context, it should be no problem. So it's always the identified is the old information, the thing that you're kind of talking about, and the identifier is the new information. A lot of people asked about, we walked happily through the mall. So again, walking is not behavioral because it's just walking, and even in this case, happily, the happily there is an adjunctive manner, so it's saying how the walking was done. It's not the emotion of the speaker, right? So if I say happily they walked, happily they left the mall before the bomb went off. So that would be a different happily. So the same word, again, depending on how you use it, if you put it as if you use it as a modal adjunct, then it's going to be the speaker's opinion. But if you use it as a manner adjunct, then it's going to be just how the action was carried out. happily they left the mall. The happily there is a modal adjunct then, expressing the speaker's attitude. So it's not modifying how they left. So you could say they left happily. That would be different. I don't know how you could leave happily. You can walk happily, but but if I say happily they left, means I'm happy that they left. So it's very different meaning. So just the same word, just where you put it in the sentence, it's going to have very, very different meaning. So you got to pay attention to those things. And there was a good question about this token and value. I gave the example. We talk about token and value largely in these identificational clauses, but it also is a more general principle that, like I gave the example about, sometimes when you get a $10 haircut, you get a $10 haircut. And somebody gave me an example. Don't blame me if I pulled a U on you. So I pulled a U on you. U as a more abstract value on you as the token, right? So I pulled a U on you. In other words, I acted like you to you, kind of thing. So language is fun, right? You can do all kinds of weird things. And the great thing about it is that most people can do this stuff, but they can't explain why they can do it or how it works the way it works. But we can do that. Someone asked if something can be a carrier and a token at the same time. No. So it's either, there is a point, Halliday talks about, there's a point where they kind of come together. But generally, they're pretty clear. So a carrier just means you're ascribing an attribute. The token value or identifier identified is about identifying the thing. And then be careful also with someone asked a question, what process does hurt come under? Say from a bad breakup, for example, John really hurt Mary when he broke up with her. And in this case, it is hard to argue that Mary is a phenomenon. But in this case, John really hurt Mary when he broke up with her. Which is the phenomenon and which is the censor? Mary's the censor, right? If Mary was the one who was hurt, Mary's the censor. And John is the phenomenon, right? So in this case, again, this is one of these where it seems like it's an active clause, so, some kind of thing, I'm doing something to her, but he didn't actually do anything to her. It's really a mental thing, that he did whatever he did, and her awareness of what he did caused a mental situation in her mind that she was hurt, what we call hurt. So that's a mental state, you're hurt. And so John in this case is actually, or what John did, is the phenomenon. So you have to, again, take it apart and think about, okay, what is really going on here? What is the meaning being conveyed, right? It's not that John actually did anything, with the intention of hurting her. It's just he did something, he broke up with her, and it's not that, he broke up with her to hurt her, but when he broke up with her, that caused her to have this mental situation. And somebody asked, there are so many different processes and circumstances. Is there a way or trick to easily identify which is which? Yes. Go to the meaning. What are you doing? It's all about meaning and function. What are you doing with it? And then you'll find out. It's really quite simple. Although sometimes it's metaphorical. So like another one, this one, I smashed his heart into smithereens. So now that is very clearly a material process. You smash something, but in this case it's used metaphorically, right? So from a syntactic point of view, of course, it's actually a material process if you smash something, but in reality, you're using it in a metaphorical way. So this is what I said. Anytime a pattern develops for one purpose, you can use it for something else, and so it's not a one-to-one situation. And again, always go back to what is really the speaker's intention in using the words the way they use them. So in this case, smashed his heart into smithereens. It gives you, rather than, I made him feel sad. That doesn't get it. It's like, I smashed his heart. I really ground it into the ground. We use the resources. Like I said, it's a resource for making meaning. So we use the resources in any way that we think is effective for getting across the meaning we want to give. And then when you had, another one was asking about when you have a sentence like, I made him a card, how do you tell whether him is a beneficiary or a client? Again, look at the possibilities for rephrasing it. So if you say, I made him a card, you couldn't say, I made a card to him. You would say, I made a card for him. So once you have the for, then you know right away it's the beneficiary, not a client, right? In that case. Because the one you give it to, it's going to be to always. Oh no, the other way around. Yeah, the client, it's going to be a client, not the beneficiary. The recipient. And then a number of people had this question about to me. As to me on the practice, the to me is a circumstantial adjunct where it's kind of like I say, but treated as a circumstance. So in this case, it's not the same as in my opinion. I mean, it kind of has that meaning, but in this theory, it's treated as a circumstance of angle. In other words, the angle from which you're saying something. So it's the equivalent of the sayer in a verbal process, but profiled as a circumstance of angle, what's called angle. And somebody asked, looking at the thematic structures, what can the choice of themes reveal about the general style of the text? Well, it's mainly about what the text is about, but very often what the text is about is influenced by the genre or the type of it. And there's been a lot of work on this aspect. In scientific literature, there was actually a recent paper I saw where somebody did a study of different academic disciplines and the thematic progression in their papers, so what they focus on more. So you can actually see the concerns of the writers in terms of which themes they pick. So there's a lot you can get out of looking at the thematic progression or the flow of themes in the text. Okay. Okay, we'll take a break and come back. And any questions first before we go? I should have stopped a little bit early so we give you a full hour. Yeah.
Let's say in the sentence, she is who she is.
I don't know who she is.
She is who
She is who? She is who she is. Yeah. Well, in this case, she is who she is. In this case, I think it would be more an attribute, no? She is who she is. Because if you think about what you're doing, you're not trying to identify who she is. You're trying to say what kind of person she is. She is who she is, right?
situation where there's an identifier and an identifier, but there's no total of that.
Not that I know of. I'm sure there must be, but like I said, there's nothing that's hard and fast. But generally, these are useful concepts. But I haven't seen any. Yeah.
Savor, is it a behavior or
Which one?
savor? What's savor?
Savor. To savor, like you're eating something? Yeah. Yeah, see, this is where, we talked about how there's no hard and fast borderline. So this is one of those that's very close to mental. So when you savor the thing, often when you savor something, there is an action involved. So like when you put it in your mouth and you go like that, you're savoring the meat or whatever it is. So yeah, sometimes there's a behavioral aspect to it, but it's more mental than behavioral, but they can both be there. The what?
So either or is
You have to again see the context. I mean, out of context, it can be either one. So within a particular context, if you're looking at it, say, oh, I could see him savoring the food, then probably there's some physical action going on there. But if you say, in some other context where you're just focusing on the mental aspect, then you could do that as well. Savor the moment, right? So when you say savor the moment, that's all mental, right? You're not doing anything to savor the moment, right? Other than just feeling it. So if you say, yeah, savor the moment, oh, okay. So that would be purely mental.
You mentioned the ice smash is slithering thing, right? So
Yeah.
what is the actual process? Because it's
The
not,
process of smashing?
It's not it's not material.
Well, the process is, I mean, the structure is as if it's a material process, but again, it's metaphorical. So you have a kind of two-way analysis. So one is the kind of non-metaphorical analysis, yeah, and then how it's actually used. Like if I say he's a pig, right? You understand the expression "he's a pig" as some kind of thing, but then if you use it on a person, the person's not really a pig. Just like when I say smashed his heart, you're talking about it as if it's a regular smashing, but it's not really a smashing, and you know that from the context. He is a pig is attributive, yeah.
I smashed his heart yet.
I smashed his heart. I mean, it's phrased as a material. So to smash something, right? So it's as if you really smashed his heart. Of course, you didn't do that. That's why it's metaphorical. Yeah. So normally what Michael would do is have both analyses, So, or at least you can talk about it from that point of view. But don't worry, it won't be on the test like that. Huh?
Let's say I broke the cup, right?
Yeah.
Material.
Yeah.
What if I say I broke the cup out of anger? Is it legal?
Well, that's just the cause. Out of anger just gives you the cause for why you broke the cup. It's just a circumstance of cause. Doesn't change it, yeah.
About the Crimea River thing. So
Yeah.
I would say she cried tears of joy. What is the tears of joy?
That's the range.
It's a range.
Yeah. Wait for them to sit down.
So basically for the market prices, negative market
No, they're actually different disciplines. We know that I forget which is but I remember some person of education. I think the science
I'm done in teaching.
Okay. Keep your notes. Put everything away. Yeah. Wait. Please use pen. Please use pen for this. I'm gonna take it off of here. Please use the pen for the thing. Maximally spread out. There's a lot of empty chairs here. Please spread out if you can. Yeah. Where those timers are? Yeah, I'm looking for this timer. Last
So you can just put it for
10 o'clock.
this one? Okay, no. Do you just want to?
Well, just, yeah, whatever. Anything that
Wait, is this right? I've used this. No, it's not. What? Oh, well, I'm being no wonder. Hey, this is hopeless. Someone.com. I know, Wamion. This is hopeless. Hey, thanks.
This is stopwatch.
Alright.
Wait,
there's a countdown one on top. Countdown.
This one?
That one.
Okay, start. It's not really very good. I had last time I had a really better one. I can't remember what thing it was. I'm going to put your name was 8 points.
check.
Just a general announcement, keep your eyes on your own paper. We've noticed some eyes wandering. If we find that, we will discount the marks.